Welcome back to the Tour Today Show. My name is Steve Fleck. Every day there's racing at the Tour at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We will talk about the highs and the lows, the thrills and the spills, the tragedies and the triumphs at the Tour, aka La Grande Boucle. On each episode of the Tour Today, I will have a special guest on with me on the show. Today, I am very pleased to have with me another of the FloBikes Commentary team. He is also the official announcer for the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup Series, as well as the UCI Road World Championships. He's also worked at both the summer and the winter games, and I get the pleasure of occasionally sharing the microphone with him. Welcome, Randy Ferguson.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on. Great honor.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. What a crazy year worldwide in sport it's been, and in cycling, the season completely shut down, and then the UCI coming up with this audacious, compacted schedule. It's essentially a whole year of racing into like literally 2.5 months. Just craziness.
Oh, absolutely. And it's has a lot to do with the financial side of it too, right? There's no secret to it that it's big business, especially in Europe. It's very Eurocentric, but there are millions and millions of euros riding on the back of these events. Something like the Tour de France, I don't even start to put numbers to it, but it is huge in TV rights. Tourism, like the bang for the buck that each region of France that is covered by stages of the Tour de France is absolutely crazy. And for the UCI also, and they've really, I must say, the UCI has really stepped up to the plate. I've been in contact regularly with them just because of my professional relationship with them in regards to what you mentioned previously. They are really in a tight bind, but however, they've really stepped up to bat. They've been regularly updating the status. They've worked on a very clear guidebook when it comes to confinement and the famous sports bubbles and all that. And they have also gone out and supported most race organizers that had a UCI status by such things as reimbursing like taxes or licenses. But what that has put enormous financial pressure on the UCI. And a source close to me mentioned that just by June, they're already about 25 million Swiss francs in the red. So it's not been easy, but they've been really trying to get this going. And they're even talking now about possible Road World Championships, elite only, at the end of September.
It's been nuts. The UCI under a lot of pressure. A couple of points just to add to that. I heard that there was tremendous pressure on both the UCI and the ASO from teams in the bottom half of the World Tour rankings, really lower ranking teams that are precarious in terms of their sponsorship and financial situation. Like if the Tour didn't run and they got those exposure opportunities, which a lot of their bonus sponsorship structure is based on, they would have had to file for bankruptcy before the end of the year. And they were basically saying it's essential that the Tour de France run. Yes, there's other races that go on, the Giro d'Italia, the Vuelta a España, the classics, etc. But the world of cycling really revolves around the Tour. And then the second point you made, France for the longest time had been the number one tourist destination in the world. And I remember reading a travel book a few years ago that made the linkage back to that amazing exposure that France, the whole country gets, and various tourist places around the country gets for 3 weeks every year in the Tour de France.
No, absolutely. And, to maybe finish what you were saying about the business side of it, when you look at team sponsorship and how the smaller teams could be hurting, think about it. Team CCC. CCC is a shoe manufacturer, a shoe retailer out of Poland. They've been in the works for many years. They were like multi-billionaires when it comes to the euro value. They're pulling out next year. After 1 year, they've had to really pay the price. They've really paid the price when it comes to the retail side of things. Look at Bahrain McLaren. They teamed up this year with that company that works. I'm not quite sure if it's motors or more the aerodynamics and the bodies of the chassis of the car, but they're also pulling out after 1 year. So those are big teams. Imagine how the small teams are suffering.
Exactly. So they across the board, challenging times, in professional cycling. And I think that they've resurrected the season and put it together I think is a good thing. The one thing for the cycling fan, there's no question for the average cycling fan, it is literally nonstop action for the next 2.5 months, be it the Tour de France, be it the classics, a lot of the classics coming up, the Giro d'Italia, and then a compressed Vuelta a España to close the season out. So that's great. Stage 1 yesterday, wild and crazy. Rain all day. It was like the riders constantly saying it was like riding on glass, on ice. What do you think of Brad Wiggins' quote yesterday, basically saying if you're too nervous to race in those conditions? He said that from the comfort of a TV studio, I noticed. But Wiggins, former Tour winner, hour record holder, he said if you're too nervous to race in those conditions, why don't you just get out of the Tour?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a catch-22, right? If you follow professional cycling and have for the last couple of decades, you know the persona that Bradley Wiggins has. Also, he has this character that he kind of puts on when the cameras are on him. He's always been a kind of a controversial kind of a persona or rider. However, I think with what we've seen this year, and your segue has been really smart in the way you've done, is that this condensed formula of the season and the restart of the season, because we did start before the pandemic, the condensed format has really pushed riders and teams to be at their best, to be at their top in races. And look what happened at Lombardia. Look at what happened at the Tour of Poland. Look what happened at the Dauphiné. You have big names crashing out and getting hurt, putting their seasons, their lives in jeopardy. If you think about Jakobsen and Remco Evenepoel, then you have guys like Kruijswijk, who is destined to maybe be on the podium, maybe win the thing this year because of improper road surfaces. These guys are hitting the deck and injuring themselves, but there's that added pressure. So that has been really one of the downfalls of this whole compressed season. And it's the riders are very anxious. They're very nervous in the peloton. Wiggins says that, but look what a lot of the riders were saying on social media, Luke Rowe, and we could ramble them on about the action that Team Jumbo-Visma with Tony Martin at their head, and we even saw Primož Roglič go after one of the Astana riders when they pulled that stupid stunt in the descent and nearly lost their leader as went and kissed a road sign. I think I was mentioning it on air today. I think there's starting to be a consensus. There's starting to be a feeling of togetherness in the peloton. You got to remember, they don't have very strong player unions like the Major League Baseball would have or hockey has. There's no revenue sharing, like all these millions of euros that ASO are making. It's not shared down or trickled down to the teams. So all this put together is putting the riders in a very tight spot. But yesterday was another move towards them saying, hey, we got to cut it somewhere. The buck stops here. And they did it. And we had a great ending apart from that crash with 3 to go. But I think that was more nerves and fatigue.
Yeah, no, it was great to see Tony Martin, Jumbo-Visma, some of the other more experienced riders in the peloton, Richie Porte going to the front and saying, hey guys, it was a self-imposed neutralization on that, 30 kilometers of descent. And then they said, we'll start racing when we get back on the flat.
Absolutely, and it's not just a factor from this year's condensed season. Look what happened to the young Björn Lundberg last year at Tour of Poland. The poor guy, improper placing of the route. You don't have protection on some road furniture. The guy hits it, passes away a couple of days later in racing, and they go on the same route this year. The same problem is there. That descent where Jakobsen was severely injured and almost lost his life, it's a downhill sprint. They hit 85 kilometers an hour. That is insane. That is unreasonable. So I tend to disagree with Bradley Wiggins.
Yeah. So outspoken Bradley Wiggins, just trying to be controversial from the comforts of a TV studio, maybe not taken literally for what he's saying. So you're working for FloBikes. This is a new experiment, Randy, for Flo to have the exclusive broadcast rights in Canada. Quelques mots sur FloBikes en français, s'il vous plaît.
Ouais, FloBikes, évidemment, c'est la première incursion d'une diffusion du Tour de France et des courses cyclistes à proprement dire pour ce qui est du Tour de France et les droits. C'est une plateforme web, c'est ce qu'on appelle communément le OTT, c'est un peu comme le Netflix, les Hulu de ce monde. Donc, c'est pas un pay-per-view. Les gens ont un peu eu l'erreur de penser que je m'inscris pour un mois pour le Tour de France. Et non, c'est un package qui vient. On a, écoute, plus de 1000 événements. On parle de bientôt plus de 300 courses cyclistes. Alors, c'est un plaisir pour moi et Audrey Lemieux d'être aux commandes pour vous livrer les détails à tous les jours.
Merci. Okay, so let's talk about the racing today. Well, Mr. Panache, Monsieur Panache, decided to come out and play Julian Philippe with an audacious attack. It kind of took on the sort of, it reminded me of Milan San Remo, like the finale every year, Milan San Remo, with those two climbs, and then Philippe going full gas like over the last one, going for the time bonus at the top, and then escaping with a group of three. Young Mark Hershey, the 2018 UCI U23 Road Champion, and Adam Yates coming across. Wow, Yates got across that gap so quickly. He closed it down, caught up with Hershey and Philippe, and the three of them battled it out down on the promenade for the win, with Alaphilippe taking it on the line and taking over the yellow jersey. Thoughts on that, Randy?
Oh, it was a very emotional win for Alaphilippe. Got to remind maybe your viewers that his dad passed away just in June, and his dad was kind of his best friend, kind of a mentor, and he was also his inspiration over the last few years. And unfortunately, he passed away. And for Alaphilippe, I think they're trying the 1-2 punch here today. First and foremost was to go get the win, a win in Nice, and the second thing was to pick up the yellow jersey in the process. Hence, when Yates went for that last time bonus on the Col de l'Aise, Alaphilippe had to react. He knew, because it was being played out virtually. They knew the gap that they had on the main pack. The yellow jersey was in play because Christophe, it was not a stage for him, our winner from yesterday's stage. So it was well played. It was a perfect Alaphilippe scenario, as in the parcours was fantastic for his talents, his skill sets, and the way that he played it out. I was mentioning on air also that I'm not quite sure, had Yates and Hirschi not acted on his, or counterattacked on his action, he would have made it to the line on his lonesome, because you saw how close the peloton was behind. Yeah. So it was a very smart move by Hirschi and Yates. It could have been, a stroke in the water for Alaphilippe had he not gotten that help, but he did it perfectly, and it was just amazing to see him come up those last 500 meters and in typical Alaphilippe way, stops pedaling, reaches down, tightens up both shoes, tightens the helmet. Okay, guys, gloves are on. Let's go. And it was beautiful.
He does that all the time. I was really impressed with young Mark Hershey, the Swiss rider, as I mentioned, former U23 World Road Champion. I mean, 22 years old and battling it out over the final few kilometers there with really, truly experienced veterans, Yates and Alaphilippe. He is a sensation. He could factor, in the GC. He's a true sort of all-rounder. He can climb, he can time trial. He might play out as a combatant here and a contestant for the yellow jersey by the time we get deeper in the race.
Yeah, I got to know him and admire his skill set at the World Championships in Innsbruck in 2018 when he won that very difficult race. He was definitely not amongst the favorites. Made his way onto Team Sunweb, has put in some solid performances. He's in the learning stage. He's what we could call a neo-pro, right? And he today played a bit of, I think, of a poker game, because he was not taking any polls at the start, and it was actually starting to irritate Alaphilippe. And he mentioned it actually in his post-race interview that he was starting to get pretty impatient with Yates, and especially with Hirschi, because Hirschi was not taking a poll. I think experience kind of kicked in, and he kind of looked at the two other guys and said, okay, I'm riding with some wily veterans here. If I want to make it maybe to the line, I better do a bit of work, which he did. And on the descent, he was fantastic. And honestly, had there been 20 more meters to that race, he would have beat Alaphilippe.
Well, he was coming on at the end. I thought Alaphilippe might have started the finish line celebration a little early, and it was pretty close at the end with Hershey having a bit of momentum. So in the overall now, this is the way it looks, as mentioned, Julian Alaphilippe in yellow. And I think we'll get to this in a few minutes, Randy, but I think he's going to stay in yellow for some time, just looking at the terrain coming up and what Dunasek Quick Step will do and the powers and the horsepower they have behind him. So it could be Alaphilippe in yellow for a number of days. Adam Yates is in second, and then third. In the green jersey, Alexander Kristoff had that green jersey, although Peter Sagan was wearing it in the race today because he was in third spot. But and both the who's a Trek Second Fredo rider? The
Mads Pedersen.
Mads Pedersen, yeah, he was ahead of him, wearing different jerseys, the white jersey. So Kristoff goes into green now. Sagan in second. Kristoff will probably wear green tomorrow. Sagan in second in the green, and Matteo Trentin in third in green. In the white, of course, the young Mark Hershey taking over that. He will wear the white jersey tomorrow. Sergio Herguita from the EF Pro Cycling Team in second, and Taj Podakar from UAE Team Emirates in third. And then in the KOM, this is another interesting that former UCI U23 road champions factoring in the jerseys here. Benoit Cosnefroy from the AGR2 La Mondiale team taking over the KOM and the polka dots, which he will wear tomorrow. And then speaking of the stages coming up, as I mentioned, and I talked to my guest yesterday, Alex Steed, about this. This is an extraordinary first week in the Tour. This is tough riding. There is no giveaways for all of these stages in the first race. Tomorrow, they're calling it a sprinter stage, but they got to go over some big mountains before they get to the sprint time bonus, and then the run into Sestrion. They start out on the coast, Randy, in Nice again, and they head inland to Sestrion. But it is a tough stage.
Yeah, it's going to be a stage where you have 3 category 3s and 1 category 4. Yeah, when you look at the bigger picture compared to all categories, the HC climbs or the number 1s and 2s like we had today, it may seem menial. However, we saw some of the true blue sprinters come in 29 minutes behind the leaders today. Yep. So it was a difficult day for them. Their legs are going to be tired, and yes, it's not your typical plain sprint transition stage for sure. So it's going to be a day where I would see and I would fathom much more than a pure sprinter like Caleb Ewan or guys along those lines. I think we're going to see more like punchers come out of that. You know, it could be even somebody like Alaphilippe who goes for it again, says, hey, you know, I'm really going to lay it on this week, and we'll see where it goes from there. Don't forget last year when he wore the Tour de France yellow jersey, it was towards the end of the tour. Now he's got fresh legs. And if he doesn't really think that he has a chance for the overall, why not wear it as long as possible to the midpoint, to that last week where we just go from the 13th to the end? The last week's going to be just mountains, 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 and the big boys in the Alps.
Yeah, knowing the panache and the enthusiasm and the passion with what Alaphilippe rides at, I could actually see him going for it and putting time in a lot of the major GC rivals, and them saying, hey, we're just going to let him go. We'll catch up with him, you know, in the mountains later on, because it's just crazy, this tour, the parkour. It's just up and down. I think there's only about 2 or 3 stages coming up in the middle part of the tour that are truly flat and you know, custom made for the sprinters. Every stage, even the transitional stage, very lumpy, very technical, very, very up and down. What a great tour. Randy, I know you're an announcer, commentator. I get to share the microphone with you a few times in a year, but you're working on a special project in Bromont, Quebec, a new velodrome there, very important, and also the just general cycling infrastructure in Bromont. Share with me and the folks listening in about that work you're doing with a great group of people in Bromont, Quebec.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity, the stage to do so, Steve. Well, one of the most important things that anyone who follows cycling or endurance sports knows that you need a good development platform. You need somewhere where the athletes can train, especially living in Eastern Canada, where the weather, especially for sports like cycling or triathlon, is not the most agreeable for some of the parts of racing and training. But in Bromont, there was a dream that brewed about, I'd say, late 90s, where there was also talk to create kind of a pan-Canadian network of cycling centers, training centers. Bromont grew out of that. The National Cycling Center in Bromont grew out of that dream. And they acquired, we had a 200-meter wooden velodrome with 48-degree bankings at the time. No building per se. We were in we had the arena where there's a couple of offices. It's grown from the early 2000s, where we acquired the velodrome, the outdoor velodrome, temporary one from the Olympics in Atlanta, and it was used. It's been used for many years, but with our winners that we have, it's become excessively difficult to keep the track up to par. The structure, the skeleton, which is made out of steel, the cement base is fine. Everything's straight as an arrow. But the surface, we've had to resurface it 4 times in the last 10 years, and it's become very cost extensive. The National Cycling Center has also grown. We have a building. We have a UCI homologated BMX track. We have dirt jumps. We have now a skate park that's been put under our responsibility by the town of Bromont. And we welcome up to 6,000 kids every summer on day camps. And that's not including like the 200 corporate events we do in a regular year. I'm not talking about a pandemic year. We do hundreds of corporate events. So it came time where we finally had the stars align a few years ago, about 4 years ago, with Nicolas Legault, who's the general manager of the center. And we found some really good people. The concept of social financing, that social idea of helping a cause really came into play. We had some people from Desjardins, which is one of the banks here that's known mainly in French Canada. We had one of the gentlemen that works there, the head of the Eastern Townships block of their banks, come on as our ambassador, our president, and we've done just absolutely miracles. We went from dreaming about a $3 million building, and we're coming up to about $16 to $17 million. So it's going to be a multi-sport building. That's very important to mention. It's not just going to be a velodrome. It's going to be a multi-sport building. And that was a good way for us to kind of segue into our presentation with the town of Bromont, who has always been a great supporter of our center, especially they've seen how it's influenced the cycling community. Bromo's kept on being a cycling mecca because of the National Cycling Center. So it's going to be multi-sport, and Sylvan Adams, who's behind the Israel Startup Nation World Tour team, well, he came in about a year ago, and he said, listen, guys, what does it take for me to get my name up on there and make this happen? And he just jumped on board. We presented a very safe and sound plan. We have all 3 levels of government that are on board and have also put some funding into it. And if all goes well, by December 2021, we're going to be racing.
Well, that was great to hear that synopsis of what's going on in Bromont, and Sylvan Adams and the Israel Startup team making history here at the Tour this year. Randy, they're doing a great job just seeing them in the Tour, and next year they're going to get some big firepower with Chris Froome, Mike Woods coming over, and a number of other star riders. So a lower ranked team this year, but really could turn into a bit of a powerhouse next year. Thanks for your time and joining me today, Randy. Really appreciate it. Merci.
Thanks, Steve, and I look forward to sitting next to you with a microphone in our hand and sharing some stories.
I hope that comes up soon. You have been watching the Tour today. My guest today has been my good friend and fellow cycling commentator, Randy Ferguson. My guest tomorrow for stage 3 of the Tour will be Dr. Greg Wells, founder of the Wells Group, a leading performance physiologist, scientist, athlete, and author. I'm Steve Fleck on behalf of the whole team at Endurance Zone TV. Thank you for watching, and we will all see you back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the Tour Today show.